posting myself using cannabis and talking about it on Instagram and social media. I think that was really shocking for people. People told me, like, you're ruining your life. When I started my business, everyone thought I was really crazy. What, you're going to be a 20-something-year-old with a cannabis company? Sure.
Today on Morning Waltz, I'm joined by Olivia Sawyer, CEO and founder of Kush Queen and a pioneer in the cannabis wellness space since 2006. She's an author who's reshaping how we talk about self-care, health, and inclusion, and I am so happy to have her joining me today and having this conversation. So Olivia, thank you so much for joining and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, and again, we were talking offline, but I'm very jealous that you are sitting in beautiful Dana Point, California right now, enjoying the beautiful weather.
I am very, very lucky. It's my little slice of heaven.
Yeah, I feel that way about California in general.
It's a special place, and it's a part of, I think it's a part of my DNA, just because sometimes I think about my life and I think it wouldn't even be the same if I wouldn't be from California. So it's a bit corny, but it's part of who I am and part of my journey.
You mentioned that you moved to LA when you were 13. So are you California born and raised?
No, I was born in Louisiana, actually. I was born in a tiny town called Donaldsonville, Louisiana, to two 23-year-old people who didn't have a clue about life. I was in beauty pageants, dance competitions. An agent found me when I was 6 years old. Started coming out to LA for pilot season back in the day in the 90s. And then by the time I was 13, my parents moved here, did the acting thing, did a lot of different things. And then when I was 18, I went to college. I had a group project, didn't know the group project was actually smoking weed. Tried that for the first time, as I was a good Southern girl from a really small town, and I was terrified. And then I slept through the whole night. And pretty much 6 months later, I worked at a dispensary, and the rest isn't history, but that's kind of the long story short.
So that was your foray into the cannabis space.
Yeah, it was this like crazy night in my life that I can't ever relive. But I went from terrified, having all of these ideas. My family was in law enforcement. My family were doctors. My family were not cannabis users. And I had this very stigmatized, very dare view of what it was. I hit this giant bong with these two guys, immediately was like, I'm going to go home right now. No group project got done. And then I slept through the night, and I had really struggled with insomnia. I had struggled with mental health issues since I was young. And I found this calm and peace, and I just couldn't believe it. And I told my parents, I was like, I slept. Like, they knew I had been an insomniac since I was a young child. And believe it or not, in our town, my friend's brother was actually murdered buying weed. So my views of it were just stigmatized, and it was just a crazy swing into the other direction. Fast forward 6 months later, I'm working at a dispensary called the Green Easy, which is now the Artistry in LA. It's still there. And every day people were coming in, glaucoma, cancer, AIDS. Sure, there is a good bit of people coming in just to get stoned. But people were using cannabis for medical reasons. It was medical cannabis. And then I discovered the history of medical cannabis, which we had medical cannabis in California for over 20 years because of something called Prop 215, which was passed off of the back of the AIDS epidemic, written by a gay man and a queer woman. And it just changed my whole life. And I was sort of evangelized from that moment and kind of became the non-weed girl that everyone knew, like the girl that smoked weed and had cannabis and could talk to you about it, but was the last person that you kind of would ever expect to be living that experience.
How was that received?
Not well. I mean, my parents are really wonderful people who my dad used cannabis. My dad preferred it to alcohol. So he was kind of thrilled that my new hobby really just included me staying home and not really like running the roads and partying. My mom was always super supportive, but I think a lot of my friends were like, what are you doing? You can't, especially when I started later, many years later, posting myself using cannabis and talking about it on Instagram and social media. I think that was really shocking for people. People told me like, you're ruining your life. When I started my business, everyone thought I was really crazy. What, you're going to be a 20-something-year-old with a cannabis company? Sure, because this was definitely pre-legalization. But I think being fueled by my passion, truly for the plant, my own journey with it, and just this unwavering belief that this is a medicine, that this is a healing plant, that anything can cause harm. I mean, water can kill you if you drown. Everything's about education. And then really just connecting with people. Cannabis was this beautiful way that I connected with people, that I helped people. And then it was just sort of this beautiful butterfly effect that sort of developed into really what I consider the only career I've ever had. And just been this, incredible journey for me, building generational wealth for my family, and then also doing something that is aligned with my highest good, which I think is the millennial dream. Well, maybe I would hope it would be everyone's dream, but definitely was my little millennial dream, that I just wanted to find something that I was passionate about, that could help people, that I could also make a living off of. And that all of that just really drowned out the noise. And I've never really been one to care much about what other people think. You definitely can't if you choose this lifestyle.
Absolutely. What was the moment? Was there an aha moment of, I am going to create Kush Queens, I'm going to start my business, be an entrepreneur, and build this? Was there one pivotal moment for you?
I would say actually it was probably a ton of little moments where my gut was just like going off, and I would feel like magic in the air. I would feel it in my soul. I would have these moments where doors would open for me. Basically, I worked at the dispensary. I sold cannabis. I had a bunch of like failed projects. I was in my early 20s. How can you really be that successful when you don't have a clue both about life and about business? But in 2013, I started a company called the Crystal Cult. And the Crystal Cult was Swarovski crystal vaporizers and accessories. And this is the early days of e-cigarettes, the early days of vapes, and the early days of vaping cannabis. Still medical days. I posted a few of the products on Instagram, and it was like an immediate, like I had sales immediately. I had business immediately. I had influencers. Within 6 months, Miley Cyrus was posting our eyewear. And then I had this really interesting natural thing that happened where I had eyewear. So I had a fashion item, but I had it next to a cannabis vaporizer. And so we got a lot of press, and I called the pen for cannabis Kush Queen. Originally, Kush Queen as an idea, I wanted to make Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants with Cannabis, a movie about girls who sold weed at a music festival. What a concept. And so I had the name, and I was like, oh, this is such a good name. It's so powerful. It's like CoverGirl. It's such a brand. Didn't have any clue what I was doing. I was running it out of my parents' garage, just sort of failing up all the time. But I'd like gotten on the glamour.com beauty blog and was just really getting this attention. And I just sort of was like, oh, I can capitalize off of it. And so I built off of it. And then in 2015, I was single, swiping on Tinder as single girls do. And I met my now husband. He was a cannabis cultivator. We met and we did what everyone said not to do, which was go into business together. And he really taught me about growing the plant. He taught me about how to make finished good products. My mom was also a part of that. My mom is incredible at formulating. She actually formulated the bath bombs with him. And at that time, I was using social media as a tool because Crystal Cult had been so successful with social media. My husband was coming home with cannabis company clients who were hiring us to do photography and social media marketing and helping with branding. And I would, I could model in the photos. I could produce videos. We were doing a YouTube channel. We had the largest network at the time on Instagram. We had about 3 million followers dedicated to posting cannabis content every single day. I was making some of these original cannabis memes, especially showing a very luxurious lifestyle with cannabis, showing, Chanel, Louis Vuitton, designer goods, and showing that cannabis could be fashion, cannabis could be beauty, and cannabis could be wellness. And so somewhere along the way in there, with my relationships I had made, I had a couple mentors who were like, look, Kush Queen is it. We'd go out to the festivals and I'd have the products. And at that point, I was tired of selling vapes, honestly. I could tell from early days with my own health that maybe this isn't the best way to use the plant. And then the more my relationship with the plant, like physically, not just like consuming it, but really learning about it, really being in grows, learning about extraction, making physical products. That is when I really was like, wellness, because this is way before the wellness movement and the concept that these things could be wellness tools. And then, throughout this, I'm experiencing getting off of pharmaceuticals after having a really traumatic experience where I got pregnant on a cocktail of psychiatric drugs that you could not have a child on. And these things are sort of like happening in the periphery of me getting more successful. And then slowly but surely, it sort of built the product line that Kush Queen is. And then we woke up sometime in like 2016, getting closer to legalization. And we had a business and we were on the shelf of, hundreds of dispensaries in California with a bath bomb, a cannabis bath bomb of all things. And it just kind of feels like after that, it was just an explosion. So it was a ton of little moments. And I never really had any clue what I was honestly doing. I just kept moving forward. It's kind of my mantra. They can't stop you if you don't stop.
It's very inspiring because not only are you a female entrepreneur building a business, but you are building a business in a space that is, there's what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, it's something that there's a lot of criticism around, and that, I think
not just criticism, corporations, big money, because that was also it. It's like at first it was taboo and no one wanted to do it. And you were crazy and you couldn't get banking and we couldn't accept credit cards to sell CBD bath bombs online. And my parents' bank account was shut down and they were put on a literal list of money launderer, drug dealer. Like it just, the craziest things happen when you choose this as a lifestyle, especially in those early days. Pendulum swings. 2018 happens. We get legalization in California. People with Harvard degrees show up to our community, which was my community at the time, not a space or an industry, to sell weed. Corporations come in with legitimately billions of dollars. Some who graciously tried to buy Kush Queen and offer me more money than I ever had. But I'm like, this is my passion. I'm building it with my family, for my family. And I just kind of kept my feet firmly planted on the ground. And I also knew that, I knew my husband knew that these things, they just actually don't grow as quickly as you think they will. Everyone saw the green rush. They had dollar signs in their eyes and they're like, this is it. But we're still so far away from federal legalization. We have medical cannabis and recreational cannabis in about half of the country. There's more access than ever. The pendulum is swinging into the right direction, but it was definitely a really interesting time. There was also this mainstreaming of CBD, which I got to be a part of, which was just unbelievable. In about 2017, 2018, when CBD went mainstream, we had a nail salon chain doing manicures and pedicures with our products. We did a collaboration with Alice and Olivia, the fashion brand. I got to go to New York Fashion Week. So when those things started to happen, people started to change. But then the game changed and it became not us against the corporations, but how do we stay aligned with the things that are most meaningful to us, especially as a brand: clean products, being an inclusive brand, upholding and honoring the true history of the plant and the people that brought us here, and then honoring those two things in everything we do: the people who use cannabis and the plant in which gives us this experience. So that's kind of been the journey, post, I would say, weed getting cool.
Yeah, it did become a trend.
It did. It was hard for me, honestly. It was hard for me. People were putting hemp seed oil into beauty products and calling it CBD, which molecularly it is not. People were, we saw this just like insane price fluctuation in the cost of our ingredients. At one point, when I started, CBD was $15,000 a kilo. Now it's like 300. You know, there's price compression. There's all of these sort of like unfun business things that happen. And then on top of it, I went from running a business in my parents' garage with my boyfriend and my brother and my mom and my dad helping me, to having 11 employees and then 20 employees and then 30 employees, and very little traditional business experience. And I am the founder. I'm our leader. I'm a CEO. It's something innately in me. I also think being in the entertainment industry gave me just this footing and this just different sort of energy to be able to take on each day, because it's something different. But at the same time, I dealt with like a lot of imposter syndrome. I got a life coach and sort of put myself through the ringer. My mom got a brain tumor along the way. You know, life happens as well. And so it's just, we had to move to Orange County because of licensing. Licensing changed everything. Things get very serious. You know, you could actually, before, you could go to jail for what you were doing in some ways, or you could get in trouble with the feds, or you could have money problems and banking problems. And then things shifted and you could have these other problems. And you were sort of in a licensed building making these products, overseeing it. Everyone has to be background checked by the FBI. The cops are watching you if they want at any time. If you mess up in metric in the system, like, there's a lot at stake. So it just, it's always been high pressure. It's always been ever changing. But I think that's the part that is so exciting and unique and special. And it's still changing. Tomorrow, the laws could change, everything could change, and we'll just have to change with it.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk to you about your personal journey with cannabis. And you had mentioned that you were on a cocktail of prescription drugs, and what has its impact to you personally with your mental health, your physical health, also while you're building a business and building a life and still being a human.
So I first want to say that I support anyone's journey, whether it be using pharmaceuticals. I support people in my family taking psychiatric medication. Some people need it, some people don't. I always struggled with my mental health. It's something that's genetically in my family. And I'm one of the only people in my family now who doesn't take medication daily. And I credit that to cannabis. I credit it to the journey with this business. And I also credit it to doing the deep personal work in learning both about myself and about the way that my body works and about the way that my environment really affects me. It was a perfect storm for me. If I didn't heal, truly heal and find healing, I probably wouldn't be able to run Kush Queen and do what I'm doing still, just because it takes so much out of you. But what it taught me was what wellness really is. It taught me how to make better products, and also how to navigate both a Western medical system and then look at Eastern medicine and look at, our bath bombs contain essential oils. They don't contain fragrances. Taking baths, just taking time for you. There are scientifically proven benefits to bathing, good for the heart, good for circulation. Really also the same thing with cannabis and psychedelics. And then there's a layer to it where I was sharing a lot of this very vulnerably on social media at the time. I was like especially there was a period where I was really into TikTok, not so much anymore. The problem with what I do is you build a huge social following and then eventually you get shut down. And so that's happened to me pretty much on virtually every app that has existed. I've built huge followings and then eventually get too big and it becomes a thing because you're talking about something that's controversial. That is against the terms of service of most of these apps. But it was all kind of this perfect storm that I was in. And I learned how to advocate for myself. I learned what I really needed. And then I learned how to use cannabis as a tool for my mental health, for wellness, for self-care. Again, another word that became such like a buzzword, but who's really taught? I mean, some people are, but I was never taught this is how you take care of yourself. This is how you put you first. This is how you speak from a place of honesty without hurting people. This is how you sleep through the night without tossing and turning and having a monkey brain. So it was, and again, this is not, this is a 10-year process. This is a lot of learning and then unlearning and then troubleshooting, weaning off of pharmaceuticals after the 10 years I was on them. It's a pretty vicious thing. They give you the medication because you need it, and you take it because you don't want to harm yourself and you don't want to wake up every day feeling like you can't get out of bed. And they tell you, you can't get off of these meds. You can't get off of them. You're going to take them forever. This is what it's going to be. We're going to change your dose, but this is where you're going to be. And that's the norm for most people. And that was the norm for most people in my family. So I didn't expect anything different. When I was young and I got pregnant and the doctor said, like, I told you, you couldn't do this. And this, like, they said some really graphic things to me about what the state of the fetus would have been. And I was like, okay. So then you have to terminate a pregnancy, which is like such a traumatic event. You're just like caught up in this thing. And then I'm like, what am I taking? What am I taking? And so I use cannabis to wean down on medication. It was a vicious year-long process, which is short compared to what some people go through. From there, getting into really good therapy, really good behavioral therapy, getting into exercising more, changing my diet, understanding I was like severely deficient in nutrients that my doctors were never testing me for. And then at the same time, I'm like waking up every day and running the business and having personal challenges and just trying to keep going. But that's also, I think, how I have a great foundation and a great strength to keep going. And I think that especially on social media, especially in building my profile in an industry of, brilliant people and people who are so impressive in huge companies, I was able to just say, like, this is who I am. This is my journey. I don't really care. I got bigger fish to fry. So do you. And it really resonated with people and it really helped me build the brand authentically. And then it helped people realize that, like, I was using these products myself. It was no bullshit. You would see me every night taking baths, every night using the tinctures, because I was just like, in order to wean down, I needed so many cannabinoids. And then it led me to writing the book and just doing all of this other stuff that legitimately came to my door. I would love to say I went out and sought out all of these amazing things, but Alice and Olivia as an opportunity came to us through a LinkedIn DM. A lot of these opportunities, my book, like, that was because I was on social media. I got that offer. So a lot of it just had to do with being at the right place in the right time and just being willing to say, like, I'm very imperfect. I'm walking a road that so many people, especially women, are on, and young people. And it just sort of helped everything blossom in an authentic and very deep and meaningful way for me.
Yeah. You mentioned especially women, and I think that so much more conversation is happening around women's health, women's mental health, physical health, getting through all of the stages, perimenopause, menopause, all things that were so taboo. I would love to understand, how you continue, and it sounds like education is also very important for you, how you combine the two and that space and cannabis fitting into that larger conversation around women's health?
Well, we know that there's just such little funding and research done around women's health. It's almost tragic when you look at the numbers. It's like really like, whoa. And through the industry, through the journey, one of my best friends, he used to be our chief science officer, MIT grad. He was really passionate about like curing endometriosis and fibro. And all of a sudden, we started seeing a lot of these patterns with our products in women who were having a lot of benefit. They were our biggest customer base. I was always using cannabis as a part of my monthly cycle. But the truth of the matter is, until I wrote my book, which was only a few years ago, the Essential Guide to Cannabis for Women, even I was flabbergasted in writing that book on how much women and cannabis have a symbiotic relationship. And we are the fastest, especially Gen Z and millennial women, we're the fastest growing demographic of cannabis consumer. On top of that, the most poetic part about it all, the plant in which gives us cannabis as we know it, the flower, is a woman. It's a female plant. The male plants, it's the same thing as, being the carriers of life. And I think that connection also has a lot to do with why women are such a powerful force. I think it goes back to the same thing. We have to advocate for ourselves. We don't have as many options for pain relief, especially natural pain relief. And it just touches on all of these different things that women face. Like you said, hormonal changes, painful intercourse. We make a cannabis infused lube that I've just like, it opened up the best can of worms of people telling me about their sex life, about all of this, all of these things I didn't even know about. The fibro community, endometriosis, these disorders that literally take people 10 years to get diagnosed with. And even then they're not believed. Not to mention just like baseline, the stress of a woman faces taking care of her children, or not even having children. It's a really interesting relationship. And for me, in the early days, it started very selfishly. I was working at a dispensary. The women were running it, but the men owned it. And I was just like, this is so stupid. Like, I want women to be in a power position. And I wanted to create my company, not only to say, we bow down to the plant as Kush Queen, she is queen, it is a she, but to have a company led by a woman. There was very few back then. There's so many more now. The numbers have ebbed and flowed, but like there was like literally like 5 women when I started, and owning companies in a stakeholder position. There's always been women trimming and running grows and running and running things behind the scenes, but they were never the owner. And I think that being in charge, a woman being in charge also, it changes the lens of how we market. It changes the lens of how we formulate, like formulating bath bombs. The biggest concern I always had, I couldn't use Lush bath bombs. I couldn't use these products because they would mess up my pH. And so it's just one of those things that, there's this symbiotic relationship. It is in every aspect of the plant itself, to the products, to the people who use them, and then to our needs not being met by mainstream health and wellness. And then this journey that our bodies are on from the time, women also struggle with sleep. And cannabis is such a amazing, well, they struggle with sleep a lot because of hormonal issues. But, and that's the thing. We have more and more data every single day, which is truly so exciting. And things are growing and things are evolving. It's crazy to say I've been running Kush Queen for 10 years now, but we're in our golden year, and to see the changes is exciting. We have so much more work to do, but it's truly a plant that can change women's lives if they're willing. And again, I've always been one of those people, cannabis isn't going to work for everybody. It's not going to work for everything, but it's I always try to implore people to try, and also know that maybe the quality of the product that you tried before isn't great. Maybe the delivery method that you've used isn't great. There's just so many avenues and there's so many ways to evolve it. And like you said, it's about education.
I'm a millennial, and I remember being in school and then being like, if you smoke weed, it's the gateway drug. And they
Told us that.
Yeah,
There.
yeah.
It was real. It wasn't like a t-shirt that you buy at a vintage store. It was a real program that we went to in school, and they literally scared the living daylights out of us with it, you know?
Yeah. How do you, if someone is, struggles with endometriosis and not finding relief from, here's your birth control, just don't ovulate. What's the support in helping somebody who's curious, who has never explored it, but also has that in the back of their brain?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's like a number of ways that people can sort of approach. It's all about approach. Some people go to a dispensary or a store or a brand and they ask for product recommendations. Other people sort of use the internet. There's a lot of amazing groups like Endocana and a lot of influencers and people who talk about their journey with it. And it's just sort of about your entryway. I'm a firm believer in the skin being the biggest organ and being sort of a very underutilized tool for wellness. And I always tell people, like, start with topicals. At Kush Queen, we do something called nano topicals, which means they're water based, so they can actually absorb through the skin. So they're not just pooling on top. They can actually fully absorb into the bloodstream. I'm a firm believer in oral daily cannabinoids, whether it be CBD or THC, depending on what you can tolerate, a tincture, gummies. I try to always steer people away from like their first experience or an entry level experience being like a space cake or hitting a bong or smoking, because when you're talking about wellness and medicine, we're really talking about putting it on our skin and eating it. And there's also tons of different, support groups and amazing things that people have built over the years. It really just depends on your why. But that's the great thing about the internet. It's truly a place where people can find that information, and social media has been a huge part in helping people spread that knowledge, because truly before the internet, it was sort of gate kept and it was like really hard. It's still harder to get information on like cancer and more like serious ailments, just because they take it down. They suppress studies and then they literally make you take it down. I mean, even with our business, we have people who use the products for cancer and for really serious medical conditions, and our bank requires us to remove all of those reviews, even if they're real and accurate and coming from real customers. We're not allowed to share them, and we could get a letter from the FDA if we choose to push that information out there, even if it's 100% real. We didn't fabricate it. So there's
That's insane.
yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff there. So that kind of stuff. Also, like, people with like colitis and chronic conditions of like the bowel or the colon, they benefit a lot from being able to use cannabis anally through suppositories. It's kind of like one of these literally incredible things. I've seen so many people go from the literal verge of death with cannabis suppositories, and it's really hard to access information there, but there's a lot of different tools and a lot of information. And also, like, I always tell people, like at Kush Queen especially, if you reach out to our customer service email and they don't have an answer for you, they're just going to hit me up. They're going to hit me up, they're going to hit my husband up, and we're going to find an answer for you, or we're going to refer you to someone. There's like, for real medical conditions, sick children like autism, seizure disorders, there's the realm of caring. They've always been a really reputable organization who can provide consultation. And then there's all kinds of great dispensaries and retailers all over the country who are also providing people access to medical advice through RNs and consultation and stuff like that. But it's really evolved. It's quite incredible. But so much of it has to do with a person's willingness to say, okay, I want to try this. And then also, if they're under the care of a doctor, the support of the doctor, because also people don't realize, like, I've worked with seniors and they're like, well, my Medicare can get pulled because my doctor doesn't want me to do this.
You talk a lot about inclusion in this space. What does that mean? What does that look like?
Well, when I started, it was beyond a boys club. It was dudes who grew weed and wore flat bill hats, worked up in the Emerald Triangle. It was just one type of person. And then as cannabis got to be more legal, it became like three types of people, a suit, very male dominated, very white, very just wealthy, even very like it's like unbelievable to think how many rich people sell weed, but I assure you that they are invested, and they are going to also just corporations, the alcohol companies, the tobacco companies, they're here, they own businesses, very, very large businesses. So for me, inclusion and that word, it all just started with like people just wanting to honor that history that we have with the queer community. Our business partner is my cousin's wife, Tiffany. She's married to my cousin, Elizabeth. We have a number of like out queer people providing a safe space like inside at the company. It's really important to me. But even then, like it was not safe for people to be queer in cannabis, even though queer people and the AIDS epidemic brought us legal cannabis in California. Like it's even still also like a very conservative place, which there's nothing wrong with that. But it just is interesting to me that there's such a conflict of politics even within our space. So for me, it's really just about making a safe place where all people feel welcome and all people feel seen and validated, because I had walked in many rooms where I basically had to walk in there with my husband so he could protect me. So I didn't have people trying to do God knows what. And there have just been so many horror stories from CEOs of companies to bud tenders to trimmers, from women being in uncomfortable situations, queer people being excluded. It has not been an inclusive space. It has not been an equitable space where people who go to jail, have gone to jail, have literally paid with their lives. They can't work in the industry. It's also about action, because had there not been organization and mobilization and action upon the part of the queer community back in the 90s, who knows where we'd be, or what the industry would really look like, because then it would have all been at progress would have been at the helm of capitalism. And I don't think that's always the best for everyone.
Yeah. It's the things that I have learned in this short amount of time, it's just mind blowing.
It really is very nerdy, very scientific, and then also very historical. It sort of blends all of these different things. And depending on which day of the week it is or where I'm at, people will, if a person hears me and my husband talking or something, are you a doctor? Are you a lawyer? What do you do for a living? And then we always tell them, oh, we're in the cannabis industry. Then their minds are really blown, especially if you're in Europe, especially if you're in a place that has less progress. It's always really fascinating to, have people see that it's a multifaceted industry and plant. It's science, it's health, it's wellness, it's social justice. It's all of these things. Is also like cuts to the core of like being a human, so it blends it all together in this perfect way. And then it's very, there's just so many nuances from the laws to the plant, and people are like, man, do you ever get tired of it? And I'm like, no, because there's always something new to learn and discover. And then on top of it, we didn't even have the ability to do medical research on cannabis until a few years ago, like legitimately. And so things are ever changing, and we're learning all of this amazing information. And that is also just so exciting. I'm always still learning too.
Yeah. What do you envision the next 10 years? 5 years looking like for Kush Queen?
For Kush Queen, we are really focused heavily on expanding both to Europe and expanding into other compliant cannabis markets. This year marked a huge milestone for us. We've always had two sort of separate businesses. We've had an online business selling hemp products, which are regulated under the Farm Bill, which have a lower amount of THC. And then we had our compliant cannabis products sold in dispensaries in California. So we just launched in Illinois, which is super exciting for us. So we want to take on some more states. Maybe New York, New Jersey, Colorado, Washington. There's a lot of other regulated markets, but very high barrier to entry and very expensive. And I still own almost 80% of our company, and we've never really raised money from venture capital. We've always maintained a really independent approach. And then also in making those partnerships, I have to make sure that the people I partner with are also sharing my values, because I could have easily been in 11 states by now, but I would have had to literally go and do deals with corporations that I talk shit on social media for the past 10 years. So we're not going to do that. And then also just sort of expanding into just other categories for us. We started as a bath bomb, and we've grown into a gummy and smokables and all these different products, and really just trying to see it through. I think that not just in cannabis, but in entrepreneurship, it has become trendy, in vogue, inspirational to sell your company to someone else. And what we're trying to do is build a family brand that lasts. I was in this industry when things went legal in California and all of these states, and I've gotten to see this progress, and I want to be running this company when we have federal legalization, because believe it or not, having federal legalization, it'll complicate my life, let me tell you. It will be hard for me. I will have to compete with even more money and bigger corporations and likely more regulation than ever, but we need federal progress. There are still people being arrested in small towns in states that have, no cannabis access all over this country. And this is America. Like, it is a freedom issue, not to get on the soapbox, but this is about freedom. It's about personal freedom. And it's also about protecting children, believe it or not. When we have legal cannabis, it is safer for young people. And the more progress we have, the better it will be, the more education we can have in keeping kids, I don't promote children trying cannabis. Some people will say, oh, I tried it when I was this age. And I'm like, well, I didn't try it till I was 18, and there's a lot of data around trying psychoactive substances, alcohol, psychedelics, cannabis, later in life, and it's safer, and it leads to less addiction, and it helps us have safer communities.
What about for you personally? What's next for you? Do you have another book in you?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, after I did The Essential Guide to Cannabis for Women, they asked me to do a second book, which was more of a creative journal for using cannabis and creativity. I did that. Writing books is really hard. Maybe 20 years down the line, it'll be more of my story and more of a business focused book. For me, I just want to keep being a part of this industry, keep surviving. It's very hard. I think the biggest thing that I'm focused on personally is just trying to maintain the magic at Kush Queen and the magic in myself. I think the longer you do anything, the harder it gets, because it's not new and exciting. And so doing that, I really always wanted to see cannabis get on TV in better ways. I mean, we've had some little reality shows and some little things. I'd love to see a documentary be made really about what's happening in our current industry. I've always loved seeing content be made. So maybe something like that, I don't know. I'm really just kind of, I finally reached a level personally where I feel really at peace. And I really feel like anything else that comes to me is just like icing on the cake. If I had, sat down with Olivia in that bong at 18 and been me today, she wouldn't believe it. And so that's sort of just it for me. Is it's all icing on the cake. And I really just want to keep being a creator. I'll always be creating something and connecting with people and, shepherding the good word. I do a lot of work in the psychedelic space now. I think psychedelics has also been a huge part of my journey, but we need to make a lot of progress there. So probably psychedelics, but that's a whole nother hour of your time to talk about when it comes to pushing forth psilocybin and MDMA and a lot of these, really locked up molecules that can have immense benefit for mental health. So probably that.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you are not one to back down from a challenge. And these are things that, if that there needs to be more conversation around, and people need to be able to have access to the benefits. So thank you for the work that you're doing and the conversations that you're having and the education you're providing. So, and I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful. It's been a great conversation. And yeah, I think there's just it's an interesting time to be on this planet, and a lot of people are hurting and a lot of people don't feel good, and there's so many different avenues to help people feel better, and sometimes you just have to open your mind to those things, and I love being a part of it, and I really love what we do at Kush Queen, and I love sharing it with people. So thanks again for having me.
Yeah, thank you.